Good afternoon and welcome to our analysis of ZAT 2017, the last of the biggies for this year. Of course, there's CMAT and MHCET left, but ZAT has its own prestige. So, how was the paper? Well, our analysis or the feedback from our faculty tells us that it was more or less at par with what we have been seeing over the last 2 or 3 years. Of course, there was a last minute change in the pattern. When I say last minute, in the last week itself, it was announced that the number of questions per section would go down by 2 questions each. So we had 24, 27, and 21 questions in the overall paper, which made it 72 questions in the overall paper. The key feature from that last year, where you were losing 0.05 marks for each question, unattempted question, was also retained. However, the difference this year was that because the total number of questions went down from 78 to 72, the number of unattempted questions after which you would start losing marks also proportionately went down from 13 to 12. Essentially, it's 1/6 of the total questions. Now, what was the negative marking? Was there differential marking? No. Since the last few years, that has done away with the idea of progressive negative marking or differential marking per questions, etc. They've become much more straightforward. Total marks remain constant for each question throughout the paper. Negative marks remain constant, which were at 1/4. Now let's analyze each section in detail. Let me start with the quant section. Student feedback as well as feedback from our user community and our faculty tells us that possibly quant was the easiest of the three sections so far in this exam. We were able to identify close to 8 or 9 sitters out of 27 questions right away in the exam. So that became a very big plus point. And we could easily solve these questions in less than a minute each. So that helped us save a lot of time and then move on to the remaining questions quickly. So which were the questions that should have been attempted? In maths, the questions that should have been attempted were the questions on time and work, where you had 4 pipes, the one on marked price and discount. There was one where you had to find the series. There were a couple of questions on geometry, then a question on time, speed and distance. So these were the questions that you should have definitely attempted. One question on functions. There was one on probability of two dice being thrown. These questions, definitely yes. On the other hand of the spectrum, there were 3 DI sets in the quant section, ranging from easy to moderate to unsolvable. So let me start with the one that was unsolvable. There was this question on regression and scatter plots, etc., where understanding the data itself was way too complicated for an exam scenario. You can easily sit outside the exam hall at home with no time pressure and try and solve this set later. However, there was no meaning trying to solve this set in the actual exam for 4 questions. Of course, you would have got 4 questions right if you did it. But then, why should you spend so much time on such a question? So this question was not to be solved in the exam. There was another question on a factory where you had raw material cost and selling price and selling cost. According to us, that was the easiest of the lot. You should have definitely attempted this question. The third set was moderate, which was on bowlers and bowling averages, etc. This was moderate, so you could have done it provided you had time. Generally, which were the tougher quant questions within this? The question on sine theta and cos theta, where theta was between 5 and 15, was moderately difficult. There was a question on time and distance, volume of a pyramid. So these were the questions that you could have attempted later because they were slightly on the tougher or more complicated side, where you may or may not have known the formula. There was a question on finding the least possible value of a function, which was easy if you knew the concepts of partial derivatives, but difficult if you didn't know that, or you had to do some manipulation. So these were the kind of questions where you could have attempted them later. Roughly, I would say 45 to 50 minutes for this section would have easily given you 16 attempts, and 15 to 16 attempts is what you should have tried. I would say 16, with a good accuracy rate of approximately 80 to 85%. This, I believe, will help you clear the cutoffs. I think the cutoffs for this section should marginally touch double figures, but we cannot take a strong call. So right now I would say we can expect a cutoff of 9 to 10 marks. Around 10 is what you can think of. But with 16 attempts, you should be able to clear the cutoff easily. Let me move on to the next section now, which is decision making. I would say potentially the trickiest of the three sections, because the answers are so ambiguous. So you need to be very careful about what the logic is and how you plan to attempt those questions. Based on that, you can then take a call. So, how was the overall decision making section? We saw two sets which were LR based decision making. In the exam scenario, I would say they were slightly on the tougher side, especially the one on Puri Bhaji. This was the question which most students would have read and tried to solve. Of course, it would have helped if you were aware of the concept of what is called a scheduler or a Gantt chart. So anybody with an operations background would have seriously loved this question, because you have to plot an entire schedule of making Puri Bhaji on two ovens from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. So that was in a way very interesting to do, but in the exam scenario you may or may not have done it. The other question again involved some concepts of probability, so that you needed to be conceptually strong. Okay, what if you didn't know how to solve these two questions? Then what should you have attempted in the DM section? One, there was a set on a pastor going to a restaurant and not tipping the waiter. That was one of the easier sets that should definitely have been attempted. The other sets that should have been attempted was one on the maid who serves in two houses and is accused of theft. That was easy. There was one question which was a single question on four people entering into a partnership, and the question on finder's fee. That again was reasonably easy. Then there was a question on Mr. Biswas trying to create a house, construct a house in Kerala. While the whole set wasn't very easy, 2 out of 3 questions could definitely have been attempted. Then there was this set on a university campus and there being a lot of vehicles within the campus. Again, in that, 1 out of 2 or 2 out of 2 questions could have been attempted. One more set, Girirajan having gone to Singapore to help his friend and starting his own restaurant. I think it had 3 questions, 2 out of 3 were doable. So if you start taking a total of all these 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 questions, I would say anywhere between 12 to 13 attempts are easily achievable. Plus, I think there are 2 single questions, one on the principal of a college or school receiving an email from a student, anonymous mail. That could have been doable. Secondly, there was also this question where there is an IT company that has been formed and that wants to inculcate a certain kind of policy. That I found easy as well. So 13 attempts is what I would have ideally targeted in this section. With 13 attempts, I would have been 12 to 13 attempts, I would have been fairly confident. Among the 3 sections, I expect the cutoff for this to be the lowest. Probably my gut feel right now is that the cutoff for this section should not be more than, say, around 6 to 7. 6 to 7 seems to be the ideal value right now. Again, it depends on the performance of the people. Last but not the least, the verbal section. I felt verbal was between DM and quant in terms of difficulty. Some easy questions interspersed with some really tricky questions. So let me tell you what were the easy questions first. There was one question on grammatical errors where a sentence had to be written in the correct manner on entrance to an MBA college. That was probably by far the simplest question. I would say it was a bank level question in XAT. But by far that was probably only the simplest question in this paper. Then there was a question on close passage where you had to fill 3 blanks. Again, it was simple provided you used answer options. The 2 questions on jumbled sentences, again relatively simple if you used answer options to eliminate. There was a small poem which you had to analyze, easy to moderate, 2 to 3 critical reasoning questions again in the easy to moderate range. So these were the questions that you should have attempted. There was an analogy question which was moderate. If you knew what the words meant, it was an absolute sitter. But the words were such that it was a touch and go question, in the sense that if you knew, then you get the marks. If you don't know, you don't get the marks. As simple as that. There was a very tricky question on 4 words to be used in a passage, and they were all related to affect and effect with the right accent. So this looked simple at times, but this was tricky mainly because of the accent part. Apart from this, there were 4 passages. One, a simple one with 2 questions on pencil, one on technology, then there was one on existentialism, which was by far the toughest of the lot, and the last one was on psychopaths, which was moderately easy. So the sets on pencil and technology should definitely have been attempted. The set on psychopaths may or may not have been attempted based on time. The set on existentialism could have been dropped. So based on this, I would say in verbal, I would put my attempts at somewhere around 14 to 15. Let's say 14 is the value right now. 2 RC sets or 2.5 RC sets and some of the other questions that I mentioned. Here I expect again the cutoffs to be between the two, so I expect it to be around 8 or 9. In general, I would say the paper was moderate to difficult. It wasn't unsolvable like the 2011-12 papers. However, it wasn't easy either. So I don't expect the cutoffs to deviate drastically from the overall values that have been there each year. I think the overall cutoffs right now should be somewhere in the late 20s. But again, it's difficult to stick my neck out and say it will be in the late 20s right now. I would rather go with what the sectional cutoffs are and then leave it, to the examiners there, because our work right now in terms of attempting the exam is done. So apart from this, the last 2 points, GK this time round I felt was a lot more static oriented and hit and miss oriented compared to earlier. So you knew the answers or you didn't know the answers. However, I felt that you could eliminate certain answers by intelligent guessing, which means that if you are well read or if you knew some of the concepts, you could at least eliminate a couple of options or 3 options in a lot of cases. Based on that, you could answer the questions. The essay topic was on jingoism going together with globalization. So it's a current affairs topic. You need to be well read for that. You need to try and figure out what kind of examples, what kind of topics would relate to jingoism and globalization, try to relate the two and present a case for the same. So as such, the topic wasn't too abstract. The 2 words were both commonplace words. So you could definitely try and think about those 2 words and combine the two and make an essay out of it. So that was reasonably easy. All in all, I would say that was moderate, at par with last year's paper. So definitely doable. Question selection was very important. Carefulness was important because some questions were easy, but you could have made silly mistakes. So these were the things to keep in mind. To summarize good attempts, I would say 16 in quant, 12 in decision making, and approximately 14 in verbal should be a reasonably good attempt. I am assuming an 80 to 80%, 85% accuracy in these. If you do that, I think you should clear the sectional cutoffs and clear the overall cutoff as well. The rest is obviously in the hands of the examiner. Wish you all the very best. Do well and see you again after CMAT and MHCET. Thank you.